not to talk religion or politics with strangers. But here at the state capitol, politics is what it's all about. The way you believe, liberal, conservative, whether you're independent, Republican, Democratic, Green Party, Libertarian, Constitutionalist, all of the above are accepted. All of the above are discussed, and all of these people come here to the state capitol to debate the legislation that eventually rules our lives. Now, this is always highly controversial, and therefore a topic that should be considered when you study any group. The group in particular that we were studying for this research project were those without bachelor's degrees. We studied through the course of this research project both those who had achieved a bachelor's degree at a four-year university and those who had not. Those who either graduated from high school, didn't graduate from high school, went to an associate, got their associate's degree, went to a trade school or vocational school. That audience is the one that we wanted to focus on, because that audience makes up 75% of the audience that we're writing for as journalists. Politics is an important part of people's lives. If you want to understand your audience, you have to understand their politics. You need to know how involved they are, whether or not they vote, and how they're voting. These things are all factors that are going to make you a better writer and a better reporter for your audience in any given location. What we determined about the non-bachelored audience, those who haven't attained a bachelor's degree, is that they're equally likely to be Democrat or Republican. We had several steps that we employed doing our research for this project. The first was secondary research projects. All 5 of our group members did secondary research on various aspects of the political system. Second, we all did interviews, 10 interviews in total, personal interviews that gave us real insight into both those with degrees and those without.
Each of us spoke with one individual without a bachelor's degree. I spoke with Kathy, age 55. She's a sorority house mom. She said her political opinions are greatly influenced by others. She says she's one of those followers who tends to listen to what others have to say.
I spoke with Travis, a 20-year-old Navy petty officer, and he identified himself as a moderate. However, throughout our interview, he made it seem that he was more Democratic than moderate.
I interviewed Rachel, a 25-year-old full-time mother, who expressed that her family influenced her to identify as Republican. Yet she wasn't certain on how well the Republican Party represented her views, and said that she doesn't represent the Republican Party well most of the time.
I spoke with Nick, a 21-year-old construction worker from outside St. Louis, Missouri. He said that while he doesn't specifically watch the news for politics, he did cite that the media was a source of his political information, including what he called political hearsay.
Lynn, a 21-year-old convenience store employee, says that he's registered to vote in his hometown in southern Missouri instead of Columbia because to him, politics matter more there than they do here in Columbia.
We also spoke with 5 experts. Kathy, age 60, is a realtor. She works with individuals from all educational backgrounds. She stays well-versed in politics, she's active in her community, and she said politics are common dinner table talk at her home.
Abbott, a 50-year-old university professor on the East Coast, told me that he tends to vote for political candidates who have also attained higher education degrees. He said he doesn't consciously do this, but with his higher education background, he understands and better relates to these candidates with their work ethic and attributes.
I also interviewed Kendall, a 49-year-old Salvation Army officer and minister who has a PhD in counseling psychology. In regard to people without bachelor's degrees, he stressed a lack of ambition and focus on local community. If there's no ambition for a person to gain their higher degree, then there's no ambition to jump headfirst into politics, he said.
I spoke with Terry Ann, a 47-year-old rental property owner in southwest Missouri. She said that she's a Republican, and she defined why she's a Republican easily. She said that she does not believe that the government is a benevolent benefactor, that the concentration of financial power and resources leads to no good. That's why she has her conservative viewpoints and considers herself a Republican.
Stephen, a 25-year-old political grad student from Columbia, says he gets most of his news from shows like The Colbert Report and The Daily Show.
Then we did a survey. With the rest of the class, we analyzed that survey and found results, some of which are surprising. One of the most surprising results is that those without bachelor's degrees are actually not all Republicans. Our assumption was based on this. The rural parts of Missouri tend to vote Republican overwhelmingly, and we assume that those in rural Missouri would be those who are less likely to have bachelor's degrees. However, we found this, that those with and without bachelor's degrees are equally likely to be Democrats and Republicans. An interesting finding, one that can shape the way that we report our news, both to Republicans and Democrats, to those with degrees and without.
What we found was this. No one was a libertarian. One person identified as constitutionalist, one as a Green Party member, and two as something else. 14 people identified as independents, 24 as Democrats, and 35 as Republicans. As you can see, nearly half of the respondents identified as Republicans. However, this is consistent with the group of people who also obtained higher education, a bachelor's degree or higher. So there was no significant difference between the ratios of those with and without bachelor's degrees. We also wanted to determine political participation and how frequently those with and without bachelor's degrees participated in political events. We divided participation into 3 separate events: voting, political volunteering, like with campaigns, and attendance at political rallies or political meetings. The chart in front of you is the participation levels of those without bachelor's degrees. The exception is voting. High political participation took place among those without bachelor's degrees, about 75%. This is consistent with those who do have bachelor's degrees. However, there was very high non-participation in both political rallies and political volunteering. This was significantly lower among those who did have bachelor's degrees. We also wanted to determine the importance of political news. As you can see, nearly half of respondents found it somewhat important, about a fourth found it very important, a third not very, and a small chunk of the leftovers said it wasn't important at all. Out of these people without bachelor's degrees, most said that it was somewhat important. The thing is, we can't tell if that's only a respondent bias, if these people responded that way because they felt that it was the socially acceptable or desirable answer. This doesn't give us a lot of background about what this finding really means, so it's hard to come up with an implication for this result. Similar to political affiliation is political leanings. On a scale of very liberal to very conservative, we asked respondents to identify where they lie on the political spectrum. We found that most people were somewhat conservative, falling down on the sides to somewhat liberal and very conservative, with the least respondents being very liberal. This was consistent among those with bachelor's degrees, the purple line, and those without bachelor's degrees, the orange line. The distance between these lines reflects the difference in the number of respondents to the survey. However, the shape of the lines are similar, meaning there's no correlation between education level and political leanings.
The group's research question was to determine if there was a relationship between education and political affiliation or leanings. The answer is a resounding no. No correlation or relationship can be identified based on the survey. As for recommendations, the findings from this research project would be helpful in the marketing strategies of political campaigns. Although the survey results stress that level of education does not play a significant role in political leanings, level of education did influence the way that subjects interacted with media, which could help political campaigns develop tactics that would more effectively impact the audience that does not have bachelor's degrees. Overall, our group found that there was no correlation between level of education and political affiliation. With the exception of high voter turnout, our hypothesis that those with less education would be less highly involved was found to be accurate. Reporters, advertisers, and politicians can all use this information to better understand and cater to their audience.